This is my lesson plan for parts 4, 5, and 6. Activities. What activities have you planned? To start the lesson, I will read from the book Arkansas from Sea to Shining Sea by Ellen McCully. This is actually a 4th grade level book, and my primary focus within the book will be directed towards the section on the historical timeline of the exploration and evolution of Arkansas. I will introduce the class as a whole to the timeline, going through each event and how each event led to the next. Explanation. I will inform my students that we will be learning about the exploration and evolution of Arkansas by learning to sequence events in chronological order of occurrence in order to learn how to remember and better comprehend what we read. Modeling. I will explain to my students how to sequence events in a timeline, beginning with the earliest date known in Arkansas history and moving through the timeline to the most recent events. I will model to my students how to move through a sequence of events by using a timeline, emphasizing the fact that important events are placed into chronological order, creating a picture sequencing Arkansas history into the present time. I will also model how to break historical events down into smaller, memorable events by teaching them how to flow through a text, asking them questions that allow them to think and process how each event led to the next, strengthening their comprehension skills. Guided practice. As a whole group, I will guide the students through the sequence of historical events from the exploration through the evolution of Arkansas using a timeline. I will ask students as a whole which events come next and what led them to the next event in the sequence. They will interact with me and their classmates in order for them to understand and comprehend how events flow through time. Independent group practice. For independent practice, I will split the class into 4 smaller groups. Each group will be given a timeline with 5 different dates that range in sequence and 5 corresponding events on 5 different cards. Each group will be asked to work within their group to match each event with each date on the timeline and put them into chronological order from earliest to most recent. While the groups are working together, I will be assessing their progress throughout the task using teacher observation. I will also be interacting with the students by questioning their reasoning throughout the task. Report back session. The students will report back to a whole group discussion where they will discuss their findings and work together to put all 4 groups' individual timelines into the correct sequence, interacting as a whole and clearing up any misconceptions within the individual group activities and allowing students to ask questions. Why have I chosen these activities? I've chosen these activities because the learner will be able to demonstrate the objectives of this lesson after the activities have been completed. Through explanation, modeling, guided and independent practice, and report back session, the students will be able to identify the correct sequence of events in a text about Arkansas history. The students will have gained the knowledge to break information down into more memorable event occurrences that can be easily recalled from memory and placed into a correct chronological sequence. Materials and resources. What instructional materials will you use, if any? The following are instructional materials that I will use during my lesson. Arkansas from Sea to Shining Sea by Ellen McCully, the teacher's copy. Historical timeline enlarged on a smartboard for modeling and guided practice. A 6-foot strip of paper taped to the wall horizontally with a dated timeline for the report back session of the lesson. 20 large index cards with Arkansas historical events typed out on them that correspond to the dates printed on the timeline. This is for independent group practice and report back session. Double stick tape to place on the back of the index cards. This is for teachers to use to hang the strip of paper for the timeline, and also for the tape on the back of the index cards for the students to place the historical events on the timeline during the report back session. Why have you chosen these materials? I have chosen these materials because they will be most effective in carrying out the objective. I will use the text to educate the students on the lesson and facilitate the learning process of sequencing events in chronological order. I will use the enlarged historical timeline to enhance their learning and comprehension skills by accommodating a visual learner, whereas reading from the text will aid the auditory learner. I will use the large strip of paper, index cards, and tape to provide hands-on learning and allow the opportunity to think out loud and interact with the text as well as their peers. Evaluation. How and when do you plan to evaluate student learning on the content of this lesson? I will evaluate the students' learning on the content of this lesson using formative assessment by giving a quiz after the report back session has ended. This type of assessment will aid me in determining each student's level of mastery of the lesson before progressing on to further material. The quiz will test the students on their ability to comprehend the text from the lesson and sequence the events in chronological order from memory. They will be asked to number events that occurred from the text in chronological order from a given list of events. I will also include one open response question to accommodate various learning styles. This will give students a different way of approaching the events that occurred in the text. It will be an informal assessment of their knowledge. The quiz will be used as a type of checklist for me to evaluate the student's understanding before moving on to new material and ultimately a final test. Why have you chosen this approach for evaluation? I've chosen this approach for evaluation because I believe it will give me an understanding of my students' overall mastery of the objective. Using formative assessment in a quiz form will give me the opportunity to evaluate whether they are able to comprehend text and sequence events into chronological order of occurrence. This type of individual evaluation will also allow me to gauge whether the students are ready to move on in the lesson or if they need more development in this skill area.